Hello, let's have another story from Jim's library, and this time it's about an extremely interesting man named Albert Coates. There's lots and lots to say about him, and Jim had a lot to do with making sure people don't forget how terrific he was and what we can learn from his life. But I'm just going to start with a little story that comes from the time that he was serving in the First World War. And this comes from a time when going into medicine was a dream for him. He wrote to his family, "I often wonder what after the war will bring for me. I must take a more practical view of things now as compared with my ambitious dreams of pre-war days. Since I've been away, instead of pursuing my scientific studies, I've drifted off into languages. French, German, and Dutch are now all pretty well mastered. Not in the schoolboy sense, that is, a knowledge of grammar and thousands of words, but in the most practical sense. I could without exaggeration find an interpretership in these languages in almost any European country." And this is a story told by his brother-in-law much later on. Bertie's command of languages was noted by the military authorities, and he was seconded to special duties interviewing prisoners. A crisis arose when fresh water wells were being poisoned behind Allied lines in France and Belgium, and Coates was tasked to detect and apprehend those who were responsible. He was dressed, of course, in civilian clothes, so no one could tell he was with the Australian Army. On one of his expeditions, he was picked up by a British patrol and accused of being either a spy or a deserter from the army. He was taken for investigation to British headquarters in Ypres. Don't know how to pronounce that. His story was not believed, and worse still, the British authorities refused to refer the matter to the Australian headquarters, despite Bertie's insistence. He was then court-martialed, found guilty, and sentenced to death by firing squad on the following morning. Overnight, he was locked in the tower room of the local town hall. Can you imagine how he felt? In the morning, after giving up any hope of reference of his case to the Australian authorities, it didn't seem like they were really willing to talk to the Australian authorities. He was alerted by the sound of a military band with troops marching up the street in front of the town hall. And they were Australian troops. Despite calling from the window of his room, he could not attract their attention. So in desperation, he decided to stage a mock escape by dropping a blanket out the window and hanging on to the lowest part, which was, of course, well above ground level. Fortunately, he was noticed, and this time his demand to see the officer in charge of the Australian party was granted. As a result, his identity and the reason for his work behind the lines was substantiated. It may be said that his subsequent value to Australia as an outstanding surgeon and his work during the Second World War was saved by his ingenuity and an army blanket.